One week, you're a genius. The next, you're throwing darts blindfolded. That maddening inconsistency cost me 4 separate fortunes before I discovered the psychological trap destroying my results. It had nothing to do with my strategy. Trading psychology stick. Today I'm revealing exactly what that trap is and how to break it permanently. They loved writing about my millions. The newspapers couldn't get enough of it. The coups, the fortunes, the times I broke the bears or rode the bulls to glory. They painted pictures of a man who had conquered the markets, who had figured out what everyone else was still desperately struggling to understand. But here's what they never wrote about, what never made it into the headlines or the breathless stories about my latest triumph. They never wrote about the nights I sat alone in my study, completely alone, staring at my trading journal until my eyes burned, trying desperately to understand why I could read the market perfectly for months on end, and then suddenly go completely blind. Sound familiar? That inconsistency nearly destroyed me. And I don't mean just financially, though that was painful enough. I mean something deeper, something that cuts right to the core of who you are as a trader and as a person. It's the feeling of being at the mercy of something you cannot control, cannot predict, cannot master, no matter how hard you try. The losses weren't what hurt the most. What truly hurt was not understanding why I lost. I would sit there with years of records spread out before me, meticulous entries documenting every trade I had ever made, and I would search desperately for answers. Was it the market conditions? Was it bad luck? Was it some invisible force working against me specifically? And here's what took me decades and multiple fortunes lost to finally understand. The answer to all of those questions was no. The market didn't care about my winning streak. It didn't care that I had just made $50,000 in a single afternoon or that I had been right 7 consecutive times. The market is not your friend, and it is certainly not your enemy. It simply exists. It moves according to its own laws, its own rhythms, its own logic that has absolutely nothing to do with your feelings, your hopes, or your desperate need to prove yourself right. And if you're going to survive in this brutal game, you need to understand something deeply uncomfortable. Your consistency problem isn't about the market at all. It's about you. I learned this lesson the hard way, and I learned it multiple. I'm stubborn, and because some truths are so uncomfortable that we resist them even when they're staring us directly in the face. You felt exactly what I'm describing. I know you have because every trader has felt it. Those nights lying awake replaying trades in your mind, those moments of crushing doubt when you questioned everything you thought you knew about markets. And right now, sitting there watching this, you probably think a better system will fix everything. A more refined strategy. A secret indicator the successful traders are hiding from you. You're wrong. The solution is far more uncomfortable than that. And by the end of what I'm about to share with you, you're going to understand exactly what it is. After tracking 5,000 of my own trades across 15 years of meticulous record keeping, I discovered something that fundamentally changed how I understood this game. Something that seems completely counterintuitive at first, but once you grasp it, everything suddenly makes sense. My worst enemy wasn't the market. My worst enemy was success itself. I need you to really let that sink in for a moment because it runs counter to everything you've been taught about trading. Everyone warns. Every book, every course, every mentor tells you to manage your risk, cut your losers quickly, don't let a bad trade turn into a catastrophe. And all of that advice is absolutely correct. But here's what nobody warns you about. Nobody talks about what happens when you win. Winning made me sloppy. Winning made me overconfident. Winning made me forget that the market can humble anyone at any time, regardless of their track record, their experience, or their supposed genius. Your enemy isn't losing. Your enemy is winning. Read that again. Your enemy isn't losing. Your enemy is winning. I went back through my journal, years and years of meticulous records, and the pattern was so clear it was almost embarrassing that I hadn't seen it sooner. I was most disciplined when I was scared. When I was building back from a devastating loss, when I had something to prove and the sting of failure kept me sharp and focused on every detail. I was least disciplined when I was comfortable, when I felt like I had finally mastered the game, when success came easily and the money flowed in without requiring much effort on my part. That's precisely when I started taking liberties with my rules. That's when I began making small exceptions that seemed harmless. That's when I convinced myself that maybe I had reached a level of intuition where rigid structure was holding me back from even greater success. Think about your own trading for a moment with complete honesty. When did you make your absolute worst decisions? I guarantee it wasn't after a losing streak when you were being cautious and double-checking everything. It was after a winning streak when you felt completely invincible. When you thought the rules that had made you successful somehow no longer applied to you, when you looked at a trade that didn't quite meet your criteria and thought to yourself, just this once, I'll make an exception, because clearly I understand something the market hasn't shown me yet. That's exactly when the market takes everything back. That's when the slow destruction begins, not with a dramatic crash that teaches you an obvious lesson, but with the subtle erosion of the very discipline that made you successful in the first place. I've watched this pattern destroy dozens of traders throughout my career. Brilliant people with sharp minds and decades of experience, completely undone not by their failures, but by their successes. Let me tell you exactly how traders actually die in this business. And I don't mean literally, though I've known men who ended their own lives after the market destroyed everything they had built. I mean how trading careers, how dreams die, how fortunes that took years of discipline and patience to build can evaporate into nothing. It doesn't happen the way you probably imagine. Most traders don't blow up in one dramatic crash. They don't lose everything on a single catastrophic bet. That would almost be merciful, because at least then you'd know exactly what happened. You'd have a clear moment to point to and say, that's where everything went wrong. Instead, most traders die slowly, through a death by 1,000 cuts. Each individual cut is small, almost imperceptible. Each one is completely survivable on its own. But together, accumulated over time, they drain the life out of your account and your confidence and your very identity as a trader. Sound familiar? I lost my fortune exactly this way. Not in one catastrophic trade, but through a long series of small violations of the principles that had made me successful. It started so innocently that I didn't even recognize what was happening. A position slightly too large here, not dramatically oversized, just a bit bigger than my rules allowed, because I felt particularly confident about this specific setup. A loss held slightly too long there, not forever, just a bit past my predetermined stop, because I was absolutely convinced the stock would come back if I just gave it a little more room to breathe. A trade taken without my usual confirming signals, just on a gut feeling, because my instincts were telling me something my system couldn't quite capture. These small violations of my discipline didn't hurt me immediately, and that was precisely the problem. In fact, several of them worked out quite well, which only reinforced my growing belief that maybe I was beyond my own rules now. Maybe my years of experience had given me a sixth sense that transcended systematic trading. Maybe the rigid rules that helped me when I was learning were now actually holding me back from even greater success. Each successful violation made the next one easier to justify. Each time I bent the rules and got away with it, I bent them a little further the next time. The degradation was so gradual that I didn't even notice it happening. By the time I finally recognized the pattern, the damage was already done. Small violations lead to occasional rewards. Occasional rewards lead to gradual erosion of standards. Gradual erosion leads to complete catastrophe. Not with a dramatic bang that teaches you an obvious lesson. With a quiet whimper you don't even hear until everything is gone. Have you noticed this pattern in your own trading? That drift away from what you know works? Before I give you the solution, I need to tell you about the darkest moment of my entire trading career, because you absolutely need to understand what's really at stake here. It was 1934. I had lost everything. Again. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I was completely broke. I was deeply in debt to people I couldn't face. Creditors were calling at all hours demanding money I didn't have. I had a family depending on me and absolutely nothing to provide for them. But worse than all of that financial devastation worse than the shame and the fear and the desperate scrambling, was that I had lost my confidence. I had lost my fundamental belief in myself as a trader. I sat alone in a small room, just staring at the wall for hours on end, not even really looking at the wall, staring at nothing, completely lost in my thoughts. I'm not ashamed to admit there were moments in that room when I considered much darker options. When the weight of failure pressed down so heavily, I genuinely didn't know if I could carry it another day. If you've ever been in that place, you understand exactly what I'm describing. That hopelessness when something you've built your entire identity around crumbles into dust. But then, somewhere in that darkness, I remembered something crucial. I remembered the fundamental principles that had made me successful in the first place. I remembered that those principles hadn't changed. The market hadn't changed in any meaningful way. The laws of supply and demand that governed prices in 1890 were the exact same laws governing prices in 1934. The only thing that changed, the only variable that differed between my successes and my failures, was whether I followed those principles consistently or not. When I followed them faithfully, I made money. When I abandoned them, I lost everything. It was that brutally simple. So I made a decision in that dark room that saved my life in every sense of the word. I would never, ever break my rules again. No matter what. No matter how confident I felt about any particular trade. No matter how much pressure I faced to make money quickly. The rules were the rules, absolutely inviolable. And that single decision changed everything that followed. The solution is brutal in its simplicity and absolutely excruciating in its execution. Think about the difference between a sniper and a soldier spraying bullets from a machine gun. The soldier with the machine gun is constantly active. Tremendous noise, creating the appearance of doing something important, burning through ammunition at a furious rate. It feels like progress, but his actual hit rate is terrible, and he's constantly vulnerable because he's drawing attention to his position. The sniper operates completely differently. He waits. He calculates wind and distance and elevation with excruciating precision. He controls his breathing and his heartbeat. He ignores every distraction around him. He might hold his position for hours or even days without taking a single shot. To an outside observer, he appears to be doing absolutely nothing productive. But when he finally decides the moment is right and pulls the trigger, he does not miss. That contrast perfectly captures what disciplined trading looks like versus what most traders actually do. You have to build a system, and then you have to follow it with religious devotion even when, especially when, everything inside you is screaming to do something different. You have to follow it when you're winning and feeling completely invincible. You have to follow it when you're losing and feeling like the system must be broken. You have to follow it when you see what looks like the opportunity of a lifetime that doesn't quite meet your entry criteria. You have to follow it when you're scared, and when you're greedy, and when you're bored, and when you're excited. You have to follow it until following it becomes more natural than breathing itself. That might sound painfully obvious. You might be thinking to yourself, of course I need to follow my system. That's the most basic advice possible. Tell me something I don't already know. But here's what shocked me most after decades of observing traders succeed and fail. The specific system itself almost doesn't matter. I've watched traders make consistent money with dozens of completely different approaches. Trend followers who only buy stocks making new all-time highs. Mean reversion traders who exclusively buy stocks that have been beaten down to extreme levels. Fundamental analysts who study balance sheets and earnings projections and ignore price action entirely. Pure tape readers who care about nothing except price and volume in real time. The specific methodology you choose matters far less than the consistency with which you apply it. A small edge, consistently applied over hundreds or thousands of trades, compounds into something genuinely significant over time. But that compounding only works if you execute your approach the exact same way every single time. If you vary your approach based on your current emotions or your recent results or your confidence level in any particular trade, you completely destroy the mathematical advantage. Make systematic trading profitable over time. Stop searching for the perfect system. There isn't one. Every system ever created has drawdowns. Every system has extended periods where it underperforms. Every system produces individual trades that look obviously wrong in hindsight. What separates the traders who build lasting fortunes from the traders who blow up their accounts isn't the specific system they use. It's their ability to execute whatever system they've chosen with absolutely unwavering discipline, regardless of how they feel about any particular trade or any particular period. If you want to know how I stopped my enemies from using my own psychology against me, subscribe now, because I'm about to reveal the 1907 mistake that cost me millions. Mastering your own psychology is essential, but it's not sufficient by itself. You also have to protect yourself from the psychology of everyone else in the market. The market is not your friend. The market is not your therapist. The market is not your drinking buddy who will keep your secrets safe out of loyalty. The market is a battlefield, and every single word you speak about your positions is intelligence that your enemies can and will use against you. Most traders don't lose because they lack skill or knowledge. They lose because they talk far too much. They reveal their positions and their dreams to anyone who will listen. And by doing so, they hand their edge directly to the very market that will use it to destroy them. I learned this lesson the hard way in 1907 when I was building a massive short position before what I knew would be a devastating market panic. I had been accumulating my position quietly, methodically, following the tape like a bloodhound following a scent. Nobody knew what I was doing, nobody suspected, and that complete secrecy was a critical part of my edge. But one evening at a dinner party, after a few drinks had loosened my tongue, I mentioned my position to a fellow trader. Just a casual comment, nothing too specific. Just enough for him to understand I was heavily short and expecting a significant move downward. Within days, I noticed something deeply troubling. Every single time I tried to add to my short position, the price would mysteriously firm up. The market would strengthen just enough to make my entry point more expensive, then weaken again immediately after I had established my position. Someone was watching my every move. Someone knew exactly what I was trying to do. That casual dinner comment through the trading community faster than I could have possibly imagined. And now, my competitors had intelligence they could use against me. They knew I was short. They knew I wanted to add size. So they played games with the price, making my life as difficult as possible, eating into my profits, testing my resolve. Have you ever had a trade move against you immediately after you told someone about it? That's not coincidence. That's the market exploiting the information you freely gave away. Think about every successful trading method as being exactly like a secret fishing spot. When you're the only person who knows where the fish are biting, you eat extremely well. You show up, you cast your line, you catch dinner effortlessly. Simple and reliable. But tell 10 people about your secret spot, and suddenly it becomes crowded. The fish get nervous with all the additional activity. The competition for every catch increases dramatically. Your edge begins to disappear because too many people are trying to exploit the same opportunity. Tell 100 people about your spot, and the fish vanish entirely. The location that once made you successful becomes completely worthless because too many people are aware of it. The market works in exactly the same way. Every strategy, every pattern, every edge that exists only works because not everyone knows about it yet. The moment any approach becomes common knowledge, the market adapts around it. Other traders front-run the setup. Algorithms detect the pattern and exploit it before you can. The easy money disappears overnight. Your edge becomes everyone's edge, which effectively means it becomes nobody's edge at all. This is precisely why the most successful traders I've ever encountered throughout my long career are invariably the quiet ones. They don't post their trades on social media seeking validation. They don't brag about their wins at dinner parties to impress people. They don't share their specific strategies with other traders, no matter how friendly those traders might appear. They understand at a deep level that trading is a zero-sum game. Your profit comes directly from someone else's loss, and you don't arm your opponents with your own weapons. There are specific things you absolutely must guard with your life if you want to survive and thrive in this business. First, never reveal your current positions to anyone. When you tell people what you're holding, you're not just making innocent conversation. You're creating counterforces that will work against you. If you're long a stock and everyone knows it, guess what happens? The instant that stock shows even the slightest weakness, they push it down harder, knowing with certainty that you'll eventually have to sell. They can calculate exactly where your pain threshold is likely to be and drive the price right to that level. If you're short and word gets around, the big players will squeeze you mercilessly. They'll drive the price up specifically to force you out of your position at a devastating loss. They know precisely where your pain point is because you told them. Your position is your private war, and the moment you make it public, you've invited the enemy directly into your strategy session. Second, never reveal your profits or losses to anyone. This might seem completely harmless, but it's actually incredibly dangerous to your success. When you talk about your wins, you attract parasites like blood in the water, attracts sharks. Suddenly, everyone wants to be your close friend. Everyone has a special deal just for you. Everyone wants you to invest in their idea, or needs a short-term loan, or has information to share. Your focus shifts completely from making money to managing these relationships, from hunting opportunities to defending against people who want something from you. Worse still, you create intense psychological pressure on yourself. Once people know you're up significantly, they watch you closely, they wait eagerly for you to fail, and you start trading to maintain your public image rather than following what the market is actually telling you. You make reckless bets to prove you're still as sharp as everyone believes. You hold losing positions too long because you simply cannot bear the thought of people watching you take a loss. On the flip side, never reveal your losses either. When people know you're hurting, they can smell weakness. The sharks begin circling immediately. They push harder in whatever direction is already causing you pain. They squeeze every last dollar out of your suffering because they know exactly how vulnerable you are. Third, and perhaps most importantly, never reveal your conviction level about any trade. This might be the most subtle point, but also the most critical. When you have extremely high conviction about a trade, keep that fire burning intensely in your chest. Let ice water flow through your veins when discussing it with anyone else. Never telegraph your certainty. I once had absolute conviction that a particular stock was going to collapse. Everything in my analysis lined up perfectly. I could see it as clearly as I've ever seen anything in the markets. But instead of keeping quiet and executing my plan in silence, I expressed my conviction at a dinner with several prominent traders. I told them with complete confidence that this stock was going to zero. What happened next? Two of those traders immediately took the other side of my position. Not because they genuinely disagreed with my analysis. They did it specifically and deliberately because they knew I was so completely convinced. They figured if I was that certain, they could squeeze me out before the move happened. They pushed that stock up relentlessly for 2 full weeks, running my stops, creating false breakouts, doing everything possible to make me doubt my conviction. If I had simply kept my mouth shut, they would have had no reason whatsoever to target that particular position. But my careless words painted a bright target directly on my back. After my biggest score in 1929, when I shorted the catastrophic market crash and made over $100 million while everyone else was being destroyed, my name appeared in every newspaper in the country. Jesse Livermore, the man who made an unimaginable fortune while the rest of the world burned. It sounds glorious, doesn't it? The ultimate vindication. Absolute proof that I really was as good as I had always believed myself to be. But that publicity very nearly destroyed me completely. Every single trade I made after that became public knowledge and subject to intense scrutiny. Every position I took was analyzed and debated by thousands of armchair speculators who had never risked a single dollar of their own money in their entire lives. When I won, they dismissed it as luck. When I lost, they gleefully proclaimed I had finally lost my touch. The constant pressure became absolutely unbearable. I found myself making decisions based on what people expected of me rather than what the tape was actually telling me. I'd hesitate to take positions that might look foolish if they went wrong, even when my analysis was sound. I'd hold losing positions far too long because I couldn't stomach admitting a mistake publicly. I had start external validation instead of trading for market truth. And when you trade for external validation instead of market truth, you are completely finished in this business. The market doesn't care about your reputation. It doesn't care what the newspapers print or what other traders whisper about you. It only rewards those who see what is actually happening and have the courage to act on that vision, regardless of how it might appear to outside observers. The greatest traders I've ever known throughout my entire career were invariably the quiet ones, not the loudest voices in the brokerage house, not the ones constantly offering opinions and predictions to anyone who would listen. The truly great ones sat quietly in the corner, studying the tape with complete focus, keeping their thoughts entirely to themselves. They entered positions without any fanfare whatsoever and exited without offering any explanation. They built fortunes in complete silence while others built only excuses. They understood instinctively that in trading, exactly as in poker, the player who controls their expression completely controls the game itself. Let me show you exactly what real patience actually looks like in practice, because most traders have no conception of the patience this business truly requires. There a period in my career where I didn't make a single significant trade for months. Not days, not weeks, months of sitting on the sidelines doing absolutely nothing while the market moved and opportunities appeared to others. My friends became convinced I had completely lost my nerve. They would see me at the club and ask with barely concealed concern whether I had finally given up on speculation entirely. Some of them started treating me differently, as if my long inactivity was evidence of some fundamental failure of will or insight. But I hadn't lost my nerve, not even slightly. I simply recognized that the market conditions weren't suitable for my particular approach, so I did nothing. I sat on my hands. I watched the tape every single day. I studied the movements of prices and the behavior of stocks. I prepared meticulously for the moment when conditions would shift, but I did not trade. This drove me absolutely crazy at first. It felt like I was missing opportunities that would never come again. Everyone around me seemed to be making money while I just sat there doing nothing at all. The temptation to force a trade, to find something that sort of fit my criteria, I squinted hard enough, was nearly overwhelming. But I had learned through devastating experience that forcing trades in unsuitable conditions was infinitely more expensive than missing opportunities in suitable ones. Then, finally, after months of disciplined waiting, the market conditions shifted. Everything aligned precisely with what my system required, and when that alignment appeared, I went in with significant size. That single trade, the one I had waited months for with excruciating patience, made more money than I would have made in an entire year of constantly taking marginal opportunities that didn't quite fit my criteria. The big money is made in the waiting, not in the trading. Here's the distinction that permanently separates professionals from amateurs in this business. The amateur believes consistency means constant activity, constant trading, always having a position, always doing something that feels productive. The professional understands that consistency actually means constant adherence to principles, and those principles often, even usually, require tremendous patience and extended periods of complete inactivity. The inconsistent trader feels constantly compelled to do something. They cannot stand sitting. The market is moving. They're terrified of missing out on a big move. So they force trades that don't meet their criteria. They talk themselves into marginal opportunities. They gradually lower their standards until they're not following any system at all. They're simply gambling and then wondering why their results are so maddeningly unpredictable. Have you ever stopped to wonder why you keep overtrading despite knowing better? The answer is that you've confused movement with progress. This might be the most common and most destructive error in all of trading, and it stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what success in this business actually looks like over time. We live in a culture that glorifies constant activity. The more you hustle, the more trades you make, the harder you appear to be working, the more successful you must obviously be. We're conditioned from childhood to believe that effort equals results, that more action produces more outcome. In most areas of life, that's reasonably accurate. But in trading, that equation is completely and dangerously inverted. Trading is one of the very few endeavors in life where doing less often produces dramatically more. You're not trying to catch every move in the market. You're not trying to profit from every swing, every rally, every decline, every piece of news. You're trying to catch only moves that fit your system perfectly. And you're ignoring absolutely everything else, no matter how tempting it looks in the moment. When you begin trading this way, something almost magical happens to your results. You stop losing money on stupid trades. The trades where you knew you shouldn't have entered but did anyway because you were bored or restless or convinced you saw something others didn't. Those constantly bleeding trades disappear completely from your record, and when those trades disappear, your win rate dramatically improves. Your average gain per trade increases substantially. Your confidence grows because you're not constantly second-guessing yourself. Your stress decreases because you're not managing positions you shouldn't have taken. And your account balance grows steadily, not because you suddenly got smarter or luckier, but because you finally stopped sabotaging yourself. Now I need to tell you about a hidden killer that almost destroyed me during what should have been the most successful period of my entire career. This is something that virtually nobody discusses publicly, and it came terrifyingly close to ending everything I had worked so hard to build. I had rebuilt my capital after my previous devastating losses. I had a proven that I trusted completely, one I had tested and refined over years of actual trading with real money. I was following it with what I believed was complete discipline, executing my rules with precision. Everything appeared to be working exactly as intended. By all external measures, I should have been at the absolute peak of my abilities. But I was also deeply exhausted. Not merely physically tired, though that was certainly part of it. I was mentally and emotionally depleted from years of intense, unrelenting focus and pressure. The constant vigilance required to trade well. The endless stream of decisions that had to be made. The emotional roller coaster of significant wins and painful losses. The weight of managing substantial capital with all the responsibility that entails. All of it had accumulated into a toll I didn't fully recognize or acknowledge at the time. I pushed through it because that's what you're supposed to do. You don't surrender. You don't take breaks when opportunities are present. You stay focused and keep grinding no matter what. That's what separates winners from losers. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as justification. And for a while, it appeared to work. I was still following my system, still executing my trades. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. But the quality of my decision-making was declining in ways far too subtle to notice on any individual day. I was slightly slower to recognize emerging opportunities. I was less creative and adaptive in managing my positions through difficult periods. I was more likely to make small errors in my calculations or my timing. I was missing subtle signals that I would have caught easily when my mind was fresh and fully engaged. None of these individual degradations were catastrophic. No single one would have ruined me, but they accumulated day after day, week after week. My edge was steadily eroding, not because my system had stopped working, but because I wasn't executing it at the level of precision it actually required for consistent profitability. The counterintuitive solution, the one that felt completely wrong to me at first, was that I needed to trade significantly less. Not because opportunities weren't present, but because I needed to preserve my mental capital just as carefully as I preserved my financial capital. I started treating my mental and emotional state as a finite resource that could be depleted and absolutely needed to be regularly replenished. That version of you that you're dreaming about, the one who trades without fear, without constant self-sabotage, without the endless second-guessing and emotional turmoil, that version already exists. It's not some impossible fantasy. It's not a destination you can never actually reach. It's a real possibility that's waiting for you to build the bridge of discipline necessary to reach it. I know this because I've seen the transformation happen in myself and in dozens of other traders over my career. I've watched traders who were complete disasters, who lost money year after year after year, who seemed utterly incapable of following even the simplest rules, completely and permanently transform their results. Not by becoming smarter, not by finding a better system, not by getting lucky, but by finally, truly committing to discipline, by finally deciding with absolute conviction that they would follow their rules regardless of circumstances. By finally accepting fully that their psychology, not the market, was the actual problem they needed to solve. The transformation isn't easy. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. You're fighting against millions of years of evolution that wired your brain for immediate gratification, for emotional decision-making, for following the herd because there was safety in numbers on the ancestral savanna. Every instinct you possess is precisely wrong for trading success. Every gut reaction is a trap waiting to spring. But those instincts can be overcome with sufficient commitment. Those destructive reactions can be retrained over time. The discipline can be built, one trade at a time, one day at a time, one difficult decision at a time. Here's what I want you to understand at the deepest level. Every single time you follow your rules when you desperately don't want to, you're building that bridge to your better self. Every time you pass on a trade that doesn't meet your criteria, even though it looks incredibly tempting in the moment, you're strengthening your discipline muscle. Every time you cut a loss without hesitation, even though part of you wants to hope for a miraculous turnaround, you're becoming the trader you've always wanted to be. The process is painfully slow. You won't notice meaningful progress on any given day or even any given week. But over months and years, those small acts of discipline compound on each other. They gradually become habits. They eventually become automatic responses. They ultimately become simply part of who you are as a person. And one day, almost without noticing, that following your system isn't hard anymore. It's just what you do. So here's the essential truth I learned through decades in this brutal, beautiful business. The culmination of everything I've experienced, every fortune made and lost, every lesson learned the hard way, every painful night staring at my records trying to understand what went wrong. The consistency problem isn't actually a trading problem at all. It's a human problem. We're inconsistent because we're emotional creatures trying to compete in an arena where emotions are the enemy of profit. We're inconsistent because we're heavily influenced by recent events, letting our last few trades distort our perception of the next opportunity. We're inconsistent because we confuse constant activity with meaningful progress, because we cannot stand being wrong about anything, because we're too eager to be proven right. Solving the consistency problem ultimately means solving these fundamental human problems. And that's genuinely the work of a lifetime. But it's work that's absolutely worth doing if you're serious about this business. Because the trader who can stay in the game long enough, who can maintain their discipline through both wins and losses, who can keep executing their system faithfully without letting emotions hijack their decision-making, that trader will eventually succeed. Not because they're lucky, specially gifted with some rare talent. Not because they have secret information or superior intelligence, but because they've mastered the most difficult opponent they'll ever face. Themselves. Stop looking for the next great strategy. There will always be another strategy being promoted, another indicator promising to solve all your problems, another system guaranteed to make you rich. Stop searching for the secret that successful traders are supposedly hiding from you. There is no secret, just discipline and patience and consistent execution of sound principles. Look at yourself instead. Look at your trading journal with unflinching honesty and identify the patterns in your own behavior. When do you consistently trade your best? When do you consistently trade your worst? What emotional state produces your best decisions? What emotional state leads you astray? Build your system specifically around your genuine strengths. Build robust safeguards against your known weaknesses. Recognize that the enemy isn't the market. The market is just the arena where the battle takes place. The real enemy is the version of you that shows up after a winning streak, confident and careless and certain the rules no longer apply. The enemy is the version of you that shows up after a losing streak, desperate and reckless and willing to abandon everything you know to be true. Then, day after day, trade after trade, execute your system with absolutely unwavering discipline. Not because it will always work. It won't. Every system has extended losing periods. Not because you'll never have painful losing streaks. You will. That's simply part of trading that cannot be avoided. But because consistent execution of a sound system is the only reliable path to long-term success in this business. Everything else is noise and distraction. In the comments below, I want you to tell me the one rule you break most often. Not 3 rules. Not a comprehensive list of everything you struggle with. Just one single rule. The specific rule that costs you the most money and causes you the most pain. Because identifying it is the first step to fixing it. When you write it down, when you admit it publicly and specifically, something changes in your brain. It stops being a vague problem you'll deal with someday. It becomes real and concrete and something you can actually work on starting today. Whatever rule you just thought of, whatever weakness you're reluctant to admit even to yourself, understand this. You're breaking that rule repeatedly because you don't know when to sit completely out of the market. You lack a clear framework for distinguishing between times when you should trade and times when you should wait. So watch this next video where I break down exactly when to stay completely on the sidelines. The specific warning signs that tell you today is not your day. The clear signals that separate genuine, profitable opportunities from traps designed to take your money. That psychological trap I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, it's the version of you that shows up after a winning streak. Master that version. Learn to recognize when it's taking control of your decisions, and you'll master this entire game. In this business, you don't get what you deserve. You don't get what you hope for, or what you need, or what would be fair. You get what you consistently execute. Nothing more and nothing less. The market is utterly indifferent to your intentions, your feelings, your circumstances. It cares only about your actions, so make those actions count. Every single one of them.